Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We ask that everybody please take your seats so we can get this panel started. We are on a strict time frame because we have another panel coming right after, so we want to make sure we have enough time for presentations, discussions, to get some rich benefits from our time this afternoon. My name is Demi Sinanan. I'm the manager for competitiveness and export promotion at Caribbean Export Development Agency, and it's my pleasure to moderate this session entitled Building Resilient Supply Chain Modalities, a Business Perspective. And I really wanted to emphasize the last three words in that title, a business perspective. We've heard a lot over the last, day and a half, but what is of absolute importance in terms of economic growth and job security in the region is that the private sector have a voice in terms of the supply chain issues that are being faced, not only in the Caribbean region, but beyond. So we have a wonderful panel here today. I have 2 pages of introductions, but in the interest of time, I will just introduce everybody by name and title. Feel free to Google anyone, but you can take my word for it. We have a very strong, a very robust, and a very prestigious panel with our panelists here today. So let's just do a quick introduction. We have right here Ms. Michelle Belgrave, who is the Customs and Trade Compliance Director for the Caribbean for DHL Express. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you.
We have our good friend, Mr. Darwin Telemac, who is the CEO of the Antigua Port Authority and also the chairman of the Port Management Association of the Caribbean. Next, we have Tamara Gibson, who is the Managing Director of Native Caribbean, a company based right here in Barbados that produces fragrances, if I'm correct. Yes? So not only do we look for here insights, but also some samples as well. And last, but by certainly no means least, we have Mr. Nicholas Bino, who is the owner of Old Duppy, another company, agro-processing company based here in Barbados. So samples once again for some nice pepper sauce, which I've tasted personally. So let's dive right into the meat of the matter. How the structure of this format will be as such. I will ask each panel to give sort of an opening statement of about 3 to 5 minutes. Following that, I will pose some questions, and then we will open it, of course, to the audience for you guys to ask some questions as well. And if all goes well and we have some time, I will probably do another round of questions, so that way we can keep the discussion going. It's after lunch. I know everybody is tired, so let's try to keep the energy level up this afternoon. So let us jump right in, because she's right next to me, and she was telling me how much she's looking forward to this panel today, and she has all her friends in her room. I'll give Michelle the floor and let her give her opening salvo, if you will. So, Michelle, over to you.
Thank you. Okay, so it's nice to be here. I just want to say thank you to Taz and all the other participants and everyone to be here, to be able to sit here with you guys. To be able to sit here with everyone and also get some questions, because I know there are going to be a lot of questions from what we're going to produce here today. Now, for me, SMEs is most important part of my job, helping SMEs to export from Barbados in a very easy manner. As far as when it comes to customs and compliance, helping SMEs to have a smooth shipping to destination is what DHL is all about. All right. What we do is that we ask the customer, hey, do you know your HS code? Right. Having your HS code and knowing the HS code at destination is also very helpful. So what we do, we help our SMEs to know all the answers for all of these questions and definitely make sure that everything goes smooth for them and they can export from Barbados very easy as well. So just to give you some information, the SMEs, they represent 99.5% of the businesses here, and 67% of formal productive employment in the region. All right, so that is, if you look at it, that is very, very high. Their participation in global trade is not in line with their importance in the economy. Only 10% of the SMEs in the Americas are exporting. All right, so that means that there's room for improvement there. We have a lot of improvement there that needs to be done. All right? And it's very important for us to promote a comprehensive SME policy framework and stakeholder coordination as well. All right? So this includes the policies, regulations, all that is involved in it. All right? So from a DHL standpoint, we are looking definitely at the SMEs because we need to have more persons exporting from Barbados. All right? Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Michelle. So some very good statistics there in terms of, the level of SME exporting, very low. How much of that is due to supply chain? Up for debate, but definitely there could be an impact. And we will look to explore on that further as we go along. So I'd like to turn it over now to Darwin to get his opening contribution, given that he is from the port side of things.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Darwin Telemak. I'm the chairman of the Port Management Association of the Caribbean. PMAC is an organization that focuses on ports, port-related matters, how port impacts our businesses and our people. That is what we try to focus on. And I think because we are all living on islands, there can be no more important discussion than around our ports, because at the end of the day, we don't have highways that connect us or rail that connects us. We're connected by maritime space. And if there ever was a time when the maritime space is challenged, it is now. So the discussion around ports is important. So I'll try to highlight how ports impact our quality of life and the service that we deliver. I like to think of the stakeholders at ports and see how they impact on the business. And I'd also like to say that when we measure the supply chain, there are various components that we are excluded from. The product manufactured in a foreign country, the vessels are owned by mostly non-regional entities, but the ports are ours. Sometimes I think the thing that impacts us the most, where we have control, we don't do very well with it. So at times I think we should internalize our efforts to fix our houses first. So I'm here to say at this conference, it's time to fix our ports. It's time to ensure that our ports stop being the creator of inefficiencies, low productivity, and let's create a path that allows our port to add some level of positivity to the experience of living on our islands. And I'll get into that in a little bit more color in a little bit. Thanks.
Thank you, Darwin. Certainly I'm going to have some good questions to ask you about what would be your recommendations to improve those efficiencies, but let's wait until we get to that point. So next, Tamara. Now, Tamara, you and Nick are business owners. You are exporting. You are trying to get your goods, sometimes case services, out of Barbados, out of the Caribbean, into foreign markets. From your perspective, what are the challenges that you face in getting that done? What would you like to see happen? So let's get your opening remarks on it, and we can probe a little bit deeper in terms of the discussion. And Nick, I'll turn it over to you to basically ask you sort of the same question.
Good afternoon, everybody. So my business got established in 2020, and we got started 3 weeks before the pandemic hit Barbados' shores. And then everything shut down. But something wonderful happened just around that time. My business began to grow, and we did so by 247% over the next 2 years throughout the pandemic conditions. I operate 2 stores, a physical location in Bridgetown and an online store, which is primarily what we do the exporting throughout. At Native, we focus on bringing a representation of Barbadian and Caribbean culture into mainstream fragrance products. And I would not be a good business person if I didn't do this. Please follow us on Instagram at Native Caribbean Cents, and our website is www.nativecaribbean.com. But even throughout the pandemic, the supply chain did not present many problems with sourcing raw materials. Even before the pandemic hit, we had backup suppliers for our main suppliers and backups for the backups. Yes, there were shipping delays, but stockpiling solved that quite easily. But the challenges came with the fluctuations in shipping costs and definitely in exporting. Many shippers overseas have introduced like discounts for moving big volumes when we are buying our raw materials. But the cost of exporting directly to customer, I should point out, my product doesn't go by sea. It's not an indirect export. It's direct to customers. So it's going to go from me directly into the person's home. We do that by air. We are integrated into DHL's e-commerce platform. And I'll give a real life example here, not to put you on the spot. But last year, my business got really good exposure. It fell into the hands of Tabitha Brown, who's a big influencer in the U.S., and she actually voted it as one of the best products she's come across for the year. And that day, our website blew up. We had so much visits to it. But it's also that day we had 68 abandoned carts. And when we drilled down on it, we recognized that the problem was in the shipping costs, and that the shipping was way more than what the product itself had cost. So I'm actually happy to be here this evening to have this discussion, and we can delve into this a little bit more if you want to, around some of those barriers, because the barriers that really exist for small businesses exporting are not what you would think that they are. We can get the product out, we can get the product produced, and some of us can even scale as micro businesses, but the barrier, the ceiling is always at the export when it's ready to leave us to the customer.
Yeah, thanks for that, Tamara. I mean, I think I've been hearing that story for many years. We have such great products such as yours, and no doubt Nick's as well when he gives his insight. But when you try to send it out, particularly that direct route, so you want to sell on Amazon or you want to sell on your own e-commerce website, getting payment is getting easier. We have different solutions, but it's always the shipping cost. And sometimes, for a small product like yours, the shipping costs are almost as much as the product itself. So it renders it. So unless somebody came and experienced it and said, this is something I absolutely have to have, then you're going to run into problems. Nick, I'll turn it over to you. Do you agree, disagree? Have your experiences been the same? Let's hear it.
A lot of the experience mirrors what Native is going through. Good afternoon. I'm Nick Bino from Old Duppy. We manufacture currently pepper sauces in Barbados. We do a range of pepper sauces. We are exporting, but we are exporting to a distributor in the UK and in the US. So our experience is a little different than direct to customer. Whereas the shipping cost is not so prohibitive per item when you're shipping pallet by sea. The prohibitive measure is the levels of margin on the other side between the distributor, the importer, the retailer, until it reaches the final purchaser. Now, when we're talking about supply chains, the cost is a huge factor in that. Our starting costs are high. But more so than that is the consistency to access of raw materials. I've created products in the past I've had to discontinue because the packaging was no longer brought in, or the local supplier didn't deem it useful to bring it in anymore. Now, with my industry, it's a massive global industry. I can easily create outside of Barbados and mitigate all of these problems. But my brand is built on supporting local, if not regional, business. So everything I do, I buy from local suppliers. And sometimes those local suppliers doesn't make sense to supply what I need. And this is a massive barrier because it damages my legitimacy when I go to pitch my product to importers in other countries. And you don't have the benefit of, as in the Caribbean, you can go to markets and you can have face-to-face conversations. Your brand has to speak for itself. So a lot of what Native has gone through, it's a lot of the same problems. And I'm sure we'll get to it, but when we're talking supply chains, the overarching theme of what I've heard for the last 2 days is consolidation. And as the Caribbean, we need to come together and consolidate to increase our purchasing power. And that's really the crux of it all.
Thanks, Nick. I mean, that consolidation, I mean, it does seem like a simple and elegant solution, but it's not. We throw around it often, but there's a lot of things that go on. Maybe we can get to get it. So now that we've had our opening sort of remarks and we've sort of set the table, I'm just going to pose an initial rounds of questions to the panelists, and then I'm going to open it up to the audience. So I encourage everybody to think about the questions that you want to ask, because like I said, this is going to be a discussion. So let's start with Michelle. So Michelle, from a customs and compliance perspective, you would work with a number of SMEs. What would be some of the practical, actionable solutions that a SME can implement in order to, improve in order to overcome the challenges that they face in terms of supply chain that we just heard? From DHL's point of view, what would be your recommendations?
Okay, before I answer that question, I'm just letting Native Caribbean know that I will look at your discount on your freight.
So we just did some business on the panel. How about that?
Okay, so as you know, SMEs, as I said before, face so much obstacles, right? But the things that SMEs can do, again, and we as DHL, we help them along the way here. HS code, clearance through customs. They need to know more about their export regulations, opportunities at destination markets, right? Yes, there's a lot, as we talk about, the freight is very costly. We need to work with them. We're working with them. What we have done so far, we are launching the She Trade program, where we're helping women export more out of Barbados and helping them to, get it easily done. The other thing as well, since a lot of the SMEs are unfamiliar with the procedures at destination, you find that they might ship, but then when the shipment gets to destination, then there's an issue. That is where we come in at DHL. We help them as well solve these issues. All right? So, as I said, what we want to do for Native, we're launching the She Trade program where we're going to help all women that are exporting on how to export and how to, come together and how to consolidate as well. All right? So definitely that's what we're doing.
So basically what I'm hearing is, some practical, actionable solutions would be to gain knowledge about the procedures that exist in terms of exporting, and that's something that DHL assists with. In terms of providing that practical guide to say, okay, if I want to export my product from Barbados to, let's say, Jamaica, what would be the market requirements? And what would be, and I need to know about my product as well. I need to know my HS code. I need to know, the different regulations that go along it. Is there, and just a quick follow-up question, is there a central repository for that information that firms can access that DHL may have, or can you guide them to a source of that information?
Yes, we have that is on www.dhl.com. You can find all the information that I have presented here there, right? And even more, right? Again, not being biased to only women, right? It's not being biased only to women, but we just find that there's a lot of women in Barbados that have companies that need help with their exportations, right? So definitely you can find out on www.dhl.com.
Okay. Thank you so much, Michelle. So, Darwin, let me turn it over to you. So, we talked about improving efficiency, sort of cleaning up our own houses, so to speak, in terms of port management and increasing efficiency, because we hear a lot of private sector persons say they run into a lot of inefficiencies on the port that cost them time and, of course, cost them money. from an innovation point of view, because I had the pleasure of visiting some ports in Central America, Cartagena and so on, and I see this kind of shop that they run utilizing technology. What can we do to improve the efficiency on our ports, and can we adopt these similar innovations that are employed elsewhere, and what's keeping us from doing that?
Okay, so you went to Cartagena, and that's not really fair. Well, even if it was a while ago, because truth be told, in Cartagena, you have 25-year-olds, 5 stories up, controlling the cranes and the trucks in the yard and lifting containers with joysticks. So it's not really fair. And there's no one in the yard. In the Caribbean, we have 20 guys on the ground wasting time. We have too many people everywhere creating risks. We have customs that doesn't seem to understand that people need their goods. We have an environment that is just absolutely unacceptable. And somehow we skirt around the issue as if, well, that's not a problem we have to solve. So, truth be told, our governments own our ports. So we should say to our governments, let's clean up our ports and fix them. And I'm saying part of fixing our port is addressing some of the inefficiencies that existed. And I want to give a plug out to the Barbados Port, Inc. Recently, I got a message, and it said that with some changes made, that they've been able to drop the port cost by at least 17% by making some significant changes to the port structure. What was that port structure? There had been an old, archaic method of stevedoring and agency arrangements that had the government changed. Said, we're not going to allow that to happen. And that was where shipping agents, and sometimes you don't see them, but they're there, shipping agents inflate the cost of doing business at the port by doing things that we ought to stop at times. And in Barbados, they did. And in doing so, the port cost went down to the users, and it went down to the shipping line. And as it went down, it made the shipping line happier and the customer happier. So I love that as a best practice. And at PMAC, it's an example that we love to see. So I'm going to just quickly go through some ideas, or even one idea that I think would be very useful. Or maybe I'll go through a few really quickly to sort of highlight what I think should happen. Ports are, in most cases, singular assets in our islands. They are so critical because in Bridgetown there's one, in Roseau there's one. We go down the islands. Trinidad has 2, but in many of the islands, just one single port. And when you look at the investments we've made in our single ports, usually it's on the cruise side. I tend to say that we almost appear to be more interested in making life easier for the tourists than our people. But I think we need to start paying attention to the real impact that our ports have on our existence. We eat what we ship. We are net importers. We are not exporting a whole lot, and I commend all the folks who do. But at the end of the day, we import, and the cost of importation, apart from what's on the bill of lading, gets escalated even more when you get to the port and you run into some of the difficulties that importers face. So we need to eliminate some of these gross inefficiencies at our ports. Equipment challenges, and I have some at my port as well that we're trying to fix, that we earnestly need to fix. As a matter of fact, it's so strange that the port generates the most revenue for the government, so the taxes leave the port, goes up to the Treasury, and the port needs a forklift, and we can't get the forklift. So we probably need to look at how we can change that dynamics, because if you give us a forklift, we would make it easier for the vendor who wants that container to leave the port and go. But the structure is not in line with doing some of the things that we want to do. And because small islands have single ports, we have to treat the port as a far more valuable asset. Recently during COVID, when the airports were shut down, and if you remember, when all the cruise ships stopped, there was one thing that kept going. And that was your seaport. You know why? Because we would all starve if it didn't work. So your life, your existence hinges, I call it the lifeblood of the island, hinges on what we do at our ports. So our ports, first of all, are not equipped to facilitate containerization. Many of our ports are break bulk ports. What do I mean by that? They were built in the 60s when pallets and slings were used to bring cargo in. We've retrofitted them to operate containers, but they're not the right built for those things. So there's that first issue that we have to fix, which is the infrastructure at our ports. In Antigua, we've made some adjustments. In St. Vincent, the adjustments is being made. And in some other islands, there's contemplation to make some changes. But we need to have those adjustments made very quickly. And I'll tell you why in a little bit. Second, when you look at the industry gains that have been made in terms of technology, the ships and the ship owners have advanced the assets on the water side to the extent where they are far superior to what they receive when they come into our ports. So a ship built in 2023, 22, even 24, meets a port that's built in 1964. That's not a proper match. So there's some challenges there. And you move on to the human side. Where do we train people to become efficient port workers? Well, somehow we just end up with a few people and we think that's okay. If that port is so critical to your business, to your success in terms of the delivery of containers to your stores and everywhere else, well, you shouldn't be just sending anyone there. You should have people who are equipped to do the work, and we should start training those people to be able to show up and deliver efficiently well. So on the human side, we have some issues. And by the way, if you're the port manager and the election comes, you're going home. Doesn't matter if you have been doing a good job. The change in the government means someone else who is inexperienced, doesn't understand the job, becomes the port manager, and we take the port seriously. We need to make sure that we professionalize this position so that it, and by the way, port managers have to understand that too. You can't be playing politics with your work. But if you professionalize the trade, then you have people looking forward to it because of how politicized it is, you don't have many takers. There are people who I'll never do that job because if it changes, you go home. That doesn't give you the best, and you need your best at your doorway. Because if you're going to open that doorway to invite people in, you're not going to put the worst person at the door. So get the ports right from a human resource perspective. Then fourth, I think when you think of ports, you analyze what drives the ports. Well, in 1964, we had some union agreements. In 2024, we have the same union agreements. It's hard to change. My God. The things we go through at the ports, you're stuck with, and you want to change it. So we have to say to our governments, help us. Help us resolve some of these issues so we can bring less pain to our people. Now, folks, I don't speak because they asked me to come to the podium. This is important to me and all people. So when I speak about a subject, it's not because I'm happy to be here. It's painful to watch the things that go on at our ports. And I'm a port director. I stand by not even being able to make things happen because the union says, don't touch that thing, and nothing happens. And I'm wondering, what planet are we living on? How does that happen? Yeah, and so we need to try to figure out how we address those. So these, I gave you 4 quick things that I believe could help solve the challenges. If we can implement 1, 2, or 3, or maybe 4, we could see some significant improvements. Now, why is that important for us to see those improvements? Let's just say you're a shipping line, and you have to go to 14 islands, and you get 14 degrees of pain. What do you think you put on the paper to charge those people? Yeah, it becomes painful too. So sometimes we end up in a position where we wonder why things are the way they are. Let's fix what we can control. And I like to say to my Prime Minister, who is very proactive and he supports where we're going, if we fix the port, then we can pressure the lines. Sometimes you want to pressure the lines, take out the beam in your eyes first. Let's fix our ports to help the lines. And by the way, the lines don't get away because they get the pressure when they deserve it. And believe me, they do get it. But I am here speaking as a Port Management Association, and I'm saying if you go to our ports, there is no one in this room who is excited to go to a port happily every week. It's a painful experience, and most people say, I'm not doing it because it's not a nice place to go. So I am simply saying, if the lines are thinking of us as a trade, 14 ports, all inefficient or mostly inefficient, we're going to have a lot of pain. When the line comes to a port in an island and they have to sit outside for 12 hours because there's a cruise ship, there is some pain. We are not in a position where things are aligned perfectly well at our ports, and we have to figure out how we do those. So creating those efficiencies will ultimately help us to have an honest discussion now with the lines, because if we can say to them, we're going to give you a 3, 4, 5, 6, 8-hour window to operate, this is our price, we might be surprised they'd pay. But because productivity has a price, but so does lack of productivity and inefficiency, and there's too much of that at our ports.
Yeah. Thank you for that honest and frank assessment of and I mean, it's, from what we can see, it's clearly a complicated issue. But I always say, from my layman's point of view, it happens elsewhere in the world. Why can't it happen here? What's keeping us back? So let's keep that question for another day. So let me turn over to Tamara now. So from the private sector point of view, as an SME, what would you recommend the top 2 strategies that the private sector and the public sector maybe work together can do to improve supply chain? Bearing in mind we just heard about the ports and so on, if you agree, but what would you recommend that will make your life easier in terms of not only exporting your product, but receiving your inputs to make sure that you can operate efficiently?
One thing that I've said a lot is that I wish that more micro businesses were invited to the table when these policies and these plans and projects are being designed. And I have to start by saying, the support that is given from the agencies in the Caribbean has been really, really good. And I certainly have benefited from them. So I'm not here to, offend any of those agencies. But there is a gap. You guys sit and you're looking at the problem from over there. This is one hand. You're seeing it from there. I'm seeing it from here. You can't see what I'm seeing. I can't see what you are seeing. And so having everybody at the table is really important to designing a intervention that is actually going to, filter down into the impact that you want to see. I don't think that MSMEs, or certainly let me just say for micro businesses, are excluded from the conversation. Mm-hmm. And these initiatives are then expected to impact on MSMEs, but it really doesn't help, right? So you talk about, we've been hearing the same things for the last couple of years. Micro businesses, they don't keep records. They're not certified for export. They don't know the HS codes. They don't know, they don't do the banking. They can't access finance, etc. That is absolutely incorrect on a lot of levels. Yes, there are some that do that, but I know a good lot that follow or have those things under control. I know for certain my business has it under control. And you do these things, and then you are met with certain gaps in the ecosystem. I would say that exporting at the micro business level is still, creating an ecosystem for that is still in its nascent stages. There's nobody that you can really go to say, hey, I'm here now. I would like to be able to send this thing this way. The most of the training that is done for MSMEs on exporting is still by sea. You talk about digital exports, but nobody's actually hosting anything that talks about, okay, this is how you operate in a digital space. And it is not about SEO. That's just one component of it. It is not about getting integrated with the bank. That is just another component of it. This is about what really does it take to sell, and how are we going to move the things then from, a door-to-door space. And that's another thing. MSMEs cannot operate like big businesses. So we're not ever going to move the volumes the way that you're accustomed thinking about volumes for export, but we can make lots of little transactions that when combined all of our businesses one big export number at the end of the year. We're small businesses, small transactions. It translates that. And even if we scale, it's still going to be small on a particular basis, but it doesn't mean that we don't have a contribution to make. So how about designing an ecosystem that facilitates that, right? That's the first thing I would say that would make a difference, having a wider conversation involving the people that you're actually creating the policies for. And I'd like to see the same organizations play more of a facilitation role. Again, from being small businesses, we cannot create the numbers, but if we can go through an association arm to some of the agencies that we need at the very end, it can make a big difference. What do I mean by that? DHL. So you're working with She Trades. I'm a member of She Trades, right? Great program. I don't know how many members are in there, but if you had all of the members in there exporting, let's say there were 2,500 of us, if there was a way, I think, to create what we need to integrate into the website for the shipments to go out, if you had 2,500 people then shipping out under this particular thing, I'm sure that you'd be able to offer like a lesser discount based on the volume move, because volume is what's important to you. We can never do it alone. So things like that, the openness on from agencies like your own to offer those things, albeit it's not what you traditionally do, but it's what's needed in the environment that we are in here in the Caribbean, with 95.5%, you said, of small businesses. Things like that would actually help us to move the needle a bit more.
Thank you so much, Tamara. I mean, it harkens back to the message that I heard yesterday, I think from the Honorable Prime Minister, when she talked about one-size-fits-all approach. I mean, essentially that's what we're doing in the region. We're doing a one-size-fits-all approach and thinking it'll work for MSMEs when in reality it doesn't. So I like that idea. Bring MSMEs to the table. Nick, let me throw it over to you. Perhaps the same question, but from your perspective in the food industry, because we have to consider from a food point of view, we're amongst one of the most food insecure regions in the world. So practically, because we import most of our food, from your point of view, how can we make that process more efficiently from a private sector point of view? What would you like to see done? What would be your recommendations as a business person in this area?
I would like to see food not imported. That's
All of us,
the first
yeah.
point. My business, I don't use any imported foods, raw material foods. Certain things like vinegar I have to import because it's just not produced here. Now, the consistent supply of these is a problem. You can plan production, you go to get your raw materials. We don't have that this week. There's nowhere else to turn. You don't then have the time to turn around and order it from Miami to come in. So in terms of food supply, I can't really speak to that because I don't use a lot of it in my products. But what I am more focusing on this forum is the export factor of it. And then the challenge that I faced was manufacturing. And we talk about consolidating all these imports, but consolidating manufacturing is a huge thing that we can look at as well. And I'm going to plug Export Barbados here because I use their facility. They've created this facility in Newton, International Food and Science Center. Without that facility, I would not be able to export. There, you can consolidate your bottles, you can consolidate the onions, they purchase in large bulk, and we have a working example of consolidating manufacturing in the Caribbean. And this is not only for Barbadians, any island can use it. You don't even have to touch a raw material. You know, if you have a brand, you can figure it out with them to do something. So it is a working example that we have here to make ourselves more efficient. And again, I bring up this point about legitimacy. Caribbean brands lack legitimacy in overseas markets. It's the reality of it coming from a small brand. And you have to instill that legitimacy. And when your supply chains are not efficient, you lose a lot of that. You don't have these super personal relationships with retailers and importers overseas. Now, I've never looked to enter the digital space of selling because when I look at the largest online retailer, my industry doesn't sell enough units for the top seller to make it worthwhile. So yes, we have, and then to go on those sites, you have to then import and distribute from there, and it just costs you out of the market. So we have to focus on being able to do it from the Caribbean, direct to customer. And again, it comes down to the efficiency of the supply chain and how cost effective it is. I got some quotes and it scared me off, and so I do strictly brick and mortar, larger shipments. But we need a vested interest on the other side as well to push that product. So everyone looks at export as this is the be-all and end-all of my business. Once I get exporting, we're good. That's when the work begins, because you need a vested interest in the market you're exporting to. And I think that our agencies, our governments, can assist with that vested interest being our voice on the ground in the markets overseas. And I've heard a lot the last 2 days about importing and bringing things in here, but we can also look at the supply chain as what are we doing outside of the islands to promote the brands, to promote the products. Because once you get the demand over there, some of your purchasing power increases because you have the demand, and it's a chicken and egg situation. And I find it easier to attack the egg than the chicken. So, you can go around in circles with this point, but what it all really comes down to is actioning these communications that we're having and actually putting things in place. So I hope that answers your question.
Oh, no, it certainly did. I mean, I think my team will always say that they hear me say that all the time. It's chicken and egg. If you have the demand, you'll have the supply chain, or if you have the supply chain, you'll have the demand. I mean, who knows? But but let's open it up to questions now. So we've heard some wonderful perspective from our panelists. I really want to get the perspective of the audience. So let's open it up. Raise your hand. We will have a mic. Identify yourself. And I just ask that you keep I know some people like to add color to it, but maybe if we can keep our questions as short as possible, that will allow us to get as much questions in. So floor is open. Thanks, gentleman at the back.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me? I've been working as a consultant helping SMEs in this region for 25 years. And these meetings, we have the same conversation every single time. We don't seem to get anywhere. There are some really good, simple things that can be done. First thing I learned was people don't like to work together here, and that's a big, big problem. And we've got to overcome that. It's much easier to get them to work together on getting inputs together than selling together. And that is the way to start. I was privileged enough to work with a company called Busher Brown in Jamaica, who then became the head of the Export Council in Jamaica. They buy bottles en masse for everybody. They buy packaging for everybody. And that is possible. That just requires organization, and I do not know why Barbados can't get around to doing it, or Trinidad or any of the others. It works. So that's one key area. The second key area, people forget, you've got millions of tourists here. They are export. You don't need to try and lumber your stuff to America or to Europe. You can take them to Martinique. You can take them to your local hotel. I've done a lot of work with this. What does it end up? Most of the products that are made here are not suitable for the hotel industry. They've never been designed to be. So if you just focused on those two things, buying together inputs, bringing the cost down as a result, and two, selling to your huge local market, which is including the cruise ships. Think about it, how big those cruise ships are. They could supply all the small industries in the Caribbean, but hardly any of them sell a single product on those cruise ships.
Yeah, thank you so much.
When you answer those questions, you've solved it.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Maybe we can ask our SMEs to sort of comment on the gentleman's suggestions.
You make an absolute brilliant point. My product personally is costed out of the hotels. Can't get them in there. I've had meetings with many hotel chains. Price is just too high. That's my product. It's a pepper sauce. Restaurants as well. The chef would rather make a fresh pepper sauce or the cheapest one they can find because they're not making money off of it. They're just giving it to customers and they're not going to work it into their books to purchase. Start off by saying I make a premium pepper sauce. I don't make a $3 pepper sauce. Mine retails we're in the $11 range. No water, no preservatives, natural ingredients. Getting on the cruise ships is not from a lack of trying. It's what the buyers of the cruise ships want. And that comes down to also the consistency to be able to supply. And that was a huge challenge in the beginning that I started my company, was even the smaller supermarkets. Can you deliver this every week, same product, same quality, week in, week out for perpetuity? Not many people can, because the access to the raw materials, and I agree with you, buying in bulk will help that. But who's undertaking that challenge is the question. Obviously, I've talked to other companies, let's buy together. Who's storing it? Who's managing the release of those products? Who's footing the bill? There are ways to do it, yes, but you have to have people to come together to do it. And again, for me, it comes back to legitimacy of our brands, and consistency equals legitimacy.
I am going to echo some of those sentiments. In selling to the hotels, the price is the biggest factor. So we already know that the cost of production in our islands, because we have to, well, not for you, but certainly for me, we have to import most of our inputs. When it comes to wholesale, then it's a real numbers game. And the truth is that the hotels really don't move the numbers that would justify the kind of discount that they want. So there's that. And if we were to start giving them the small amounts at the price, it would hurt the business in the long run. It would not be very profitable. Secondly, in terms of working together, yes, there is a fear emotionally among Caribbean people. We don't like to work together because we're afraid of the competition. At the root of it, that's what it is. But the way to mitigate that is that the size of the opportunities that come to us aren't big enough either. If the size of the opportunity were bigger, and I having 200 and you having 60, but that opportunity allowed both of us to sell 100% of what we have, you would find us working together. But the size of the opportunities that are brought to SMEs are not big enough. We do need an anchor. We do need a facilitation agency to go out there and get the big contracts and perhaps form associations and clusters so that we can, okay, we're selling this, and whether you're a small company, a big company, a medium company, in between there, we want X amount of your finished goods for this opportunity. So I would challenge the agencies in finding bigger opportunities for us. And thirdly, cruise ship visitors really want experiences. The ship gives them everything. They're not spending all that money for an all-inclusive experience, 7, 12 days to come and buy products. They want to experience something. They're not really product shoppers. That's just the nature of them. The reverse exportation, I agree with you 100%. Lots of my products people buy before they leave the island and take back with them. I've also had orders since they've returned home to get more things, but that's because they've now made a cultural connection with the product. So again, what you're saying is really good, but when you look at it, there's still certain things that we need to fix for your suggestions to work, and I look forward to the day that we can do those things.
Good afternoon, Gavin Bovell, University of the West Indies. My question is directed to the SMEs as well as the trade facilitators. The concept that the cruise ships and the hotels aren't really interested in local products as much, and I think I definitely agree with Ms. Gibson that persons are interested in experiences, local, authentic experiences. When they come to the Caribbean, it is incumbent upon us to make sure that we that are in the region negotiate that these are the experiences that we want to be delivered to the persons that are coming to the Caribbean. They're not just passing through the Caribbean. They want to experience the Caribbean. And the best way to experience the Caribbean is through its products, its food, its culture. And to make sure that we believe that before they even come in is important. So in saying that, what I'm suggesting is when these cruise ships come in, when we look at the hospitality industry and look at how they manage their supply chains, the items that are coming in from outside that can be procured regionally is something that we really need to look at. And I think we need to draw a line in the sand at some point, because that line has been skirted and misconstrued, and it has damaged our ability to develop the capacity within the region, because we allow them and these entities to build a case around the cost of the product, and it erodes the authenticity of the products and the experience that persons are actually paying for. So in that sense, we need to be able to do a better job at making sure that persons understand the value of the products that we have within the region.
Maybe we could keep our response to maybe 1 minute so we can get one more question, because we're getting close to time. So, yeah. No response? Okay. Well, here's more comment than anything else. Yeah, gentlemen.
Yeah, my name is Mark Lopez. I'm with Tropical Shipping. My question is for Mr. Telemac and your members of PMAC. You talked a bit about the status quo in the ports. As you're aware, we're facing some new regulations from IMO on carbon output. What are the ports doing to increase efficiency to help the carriers meet the new requirements, so that we don't have to change our rotation or look at different services to meet the requirements, slowing the vessels and changing cutoffs, etc.?
Thank you, Mike, for a very important subject. I was thinking we don't have enough time to deal with it. If you got your eyes closed, you should open it. That issue is a very, very serious issue. I started by saying a few months ago, Haiti lost the service of Crowley shipping. They lost it because the IMO implemented the CII, Carbon Intensity Index measurement. You should Google that. And with the new regulations, it meant that Crowley could not make the turnaround quick enough to get back to Jacksonville within a 7-day turnaround. So they dropped Haiti in a week. It's just gone. The ship made the call in a week. So all that tonnage that would make its way to an island just couldn't get there. Now they had to figure out a way to do it, but imagine the shock to a system. But imagine the ship now not having all that tonnage that it was being paid to move, and the difference it now has is less, going over almost the same distance, so that new volume carries the extra cost. So the CII is a very, very difficult situation for us to cope with. And the ship, Mark, you're putting me on the spot here, so I'll answer it the best way I can. Our ports are not prepared for the CII. To adequately address the issues that the ships are faced with, we need to have all efficiently built, structured cargo ports that do not have cruise ships at the berth. That does not exist in the Caribbean. A lot of our ports use our cargo berths for cruise ships, and so when the ships come in, remember, they are not supposed to be steaming or burning any carbon while they're in port. They would have to sit there for 8, 9, 10 hours waiting for the cruise ship to leave. And as they wait, the CII score keeps rising and the pressure is mounting on the ship. There is a vulnerability at stake here for our region. A vulnerability that we can't fix in a week or a year, because it'll take a while to get our ports up to scratch. The planning around that situation emerging, we did not do very well. I would say that with the exception of the Antigua Port Authority that's built a new port, and we didn't build it with CII in mind. We built it, but we are lucky to say that we probably are not one of those ports that are in the line of not being ready for CII. But guess what? It doesn't even matter, because the port before us and the port after us is in the same space, so your efficiencies are nullified. So we need a regional approach to solving this challenge. Because when you leave Antigua, where we have a crane, and that crane lifts 22 to 24 moves off the ship, and it goes to St. Kitts, where the ship has to use its own crane now. And that ship discharging cargo in St. Kitts can only do 8 or 9 moves. That's a huge difference in terms of operating time. And then it goes to Dominica, where it has to use its own crane, but it meets a cruise ship there. So now it waits for 8 hours. It has to use its crane for 9 hours. Good grief, folks. This is the reality of our Caribbean. With a global regulation that we have no way of rolling back, we are facing a very serious problem. And so we are at PMAC next month in June, asking for the shipping lines to come join with us to have a discussion on designing a response to the owners of the ports or governments to say, we must fix this problem. Now, if I was going to do it quickly, I would say to Grenada, remove the warehouses in your port, put the warehouses someplace else, put a crane. Because in Grenada, there is no crane. You have to use ship's gear. So we want Grenada to be more resilient. Just take the warehouses off, put a crane there, fixed. St. Kitts, remove the warehouse, put a crane there, fix 2 ports. You go to another one in Dominica, you put a crane. But that's not so easy to do, because are the surfaces strong enough to take a crane? Were they built for that? So lots of things have to go into consideration here. So there is a need, and we're going to do that at PMAC in Suriname in June, where we will be discussing the status of the ports, their ability to adapt, how it is that we can actually present an idea that the ships can live with, because maybe we now need to start thinking about designing regional hubs, maybe reducing how far the ships go, ideas that we don't have a lot of time to deal with now. Big question mark, but I'm telling you, if there's maybe in another session sometime we may have a little bit more time on it, but this is a big question. And I hope in this forum we can raise the voice loud enough to tell the world the Caribbean needs some time. Don't know if we'll get it, but we need some time.
Yeah, thank you for that, Darwin. I mean, all right, so we have 1 minute left, so I'm going to utilize that 1 minute. I'm just going to ask a fairly controversial question, maybe, in my mind. Everybody, in 15 seconds, based on what the gentleman was saying, what do you want to see out of this forum? What would be ideal for you? 15 seconds. So, Michelle?
Okay. Out of the session,
out of this forum, this entire forum.
This entire forum. Okay. So, from a DHL point of view, we want to become more aware of the opportunities to reach the global markets, SMEs. And we want the SMEs to get the knowledge and the tools to participate in e-commerce effectively. And we also want them to grow their business sustainably. So we're going to be here to help them.
Thanks. Darwin?
We're going to raise the alarm with the agencies that are here, IMO, UN, all of the agencies, to say we need some time. We need a carve-out. Give us a chance to adjust our ports, and maybe in a little while we may be able to deal with this. But we can't cope with it right now.
SMEs, Tamara?
I would attack the shipping agencies. We need lower rates. We also need flat rate shipping across the Caribbean, because the Caribbean is a couple million people strong. It's a big market. We can trade with one another. Yeah, that would be it.
Cool. And Nick?
Action.
Action. Absolutely. That was the word I was looking for. Let's get some action. So with that, thank you all very much. We came in on time. You have been a wonderful audience, and please stick around. We have another panel coming up right next. Thank you.